it. So I would say, if I were you, do post, and do blogs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's actually what you're saying is we can't just be visible anymore.
Yeah.
Now, it's about credibility now. And
Yeah.
so to be found by AI and to be recommended by AI, you've got to make yourself credible.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. That actually brings me to my next question, now that you mentioned that. So obviously many agents, you're talking about being visible and being credible. Many agents obviously do have social media profiles. Some might even have websites. But is that actually enough, the traditional sense that we had? Is it enough now in the new sort of AI-driven era?
They say the longest answer or the shortest answer you can give is no. So, no. To be the trusted source, I think your data must be machine readable. You must make sure when you put any information out there, and any articles out there, and any blogs out there, that it have the necessary information on your platform to connect you with hyperlinks and so on to your area of expertise, so that AI can pick you up for that. So AI looks at entity relationships, and it really recognizes those entity relationships. And if your name consistently appears with those link words, like, let's say, for example, Clifton Beachfront expert or Durbanville residential specialist, across EXP's cloud platforms that we put out there and that we've got available for our agents, the AI builds a trust graph basically around you. And I would say your goal as an agent for 2026 is to move your online presence to, and this is a very difficult word for Afrikaans person to say, I have to say, so algorithmic authority. And I have to read it. So I practice that one. So
What is that? Is that algoritmische autoriteit?
Algoritmische autoriteit. In Afrikaans it's almost more difficult. So, but yeah, so I had to go and look it up. But that is what you want to do. Yeah. You need to be the authority. You need to be the trusted source.
So it's not just about being online, it's really about adding value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, another one for you then.
Keeping you busy.
We hear tech and AI everywhere. How do EXP's tools like Home Hunter give our agents an unfair advantage?
Well, I love Home Hunter.
Yeah, I know.
So I just love Home Hunter. So with Home Hunter, I think it's so extremely important to get away from the traditional ways that we do real estate. And in the past, you would have gone and you would have refreshed and put your listings on a website and do the syndications, and you're just hoping for a lead. I always say, you're sitting there and praying, oh, I've done this and now nothing is happening. You know, now you've got the opportunity with Home Hunter to have your own sort of scout as an agent. And Home Hunter gives you the opportunity to see what your client is looking at. So even if your client is looking at a property on another company's website, it captures that information. And with smart AI technology, also give through that information to you. But the other exciting part of Home Hunter is the AI tools within Home Hunter gives you the opportunity basically to say to your client, there's an AI assistant for you for your home search. And it gives value, it helps you with reports, tell you more about the area that you're looking at. The other day I tested it out and I said, listen, my kids are in this school and I'm looking at this house and I'm looking at this house. Which one would be the better option? And it compared how far you would drive, how's the traffic, and all of that. So that's the kind of technology you want to see. And that's what you want to put in your client's hands to make it easier, but so much more for you as the agent to know whether your buyers are serious buyers. Are they searching for properties? Because you are getting that notifications, and that helps a lot. So Home Hunter for me, for example, is a next level tool, and the more that you use it, the better is the opportunities for you to create that leads for yourself. Yeah, and it makes you as the agent the champion for your client and also advisor for your client.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's like you actually implied there. So us as agents, we're moving from being reactive to more proactive.
Absolutely.
Actually,
Yes.
quite nice. We now stalking our clients. Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Basically. Okay. Seth, Harvey needs a bit of a break. This one's for you. So again, as we sort of established here, AI is very noisy right now, right? Now, how do you decide with everything that's out there, and you building things, and you're adopting AI and building AI? How do you decide what to build or what to adopt amongst all this noise and all this hype?
Great question. Yeah, I
Thank you.
don't know if anything's I don't know if anything's ever been as noisy as as the AI buzz. There's been like over 100,000 new AI startups in the last couple of years. Um, so the to find the signal in the noise, we try a lot of the tools is the first answer. So we try a lot of the tools, a lot of the new technology, a lot of AI things that come out, even if it's a whole new company or a whole new product. A lot of times it ends up being what's called a wrapper around something like ChatGPT. So it's basically ChatGPT, but a specialized version, which is just ChatGPT with like a special prompt in it, right? And then they try to. So people are starting to see through that a little bit, and a lot of times I can see that that's what that's going to be, and we don't need to worry about that. But I'm interested. We're interested in things that could be transformative for the business, right? So transformative for EXP as a company, and transformative for agents to give agents an unfair advantage or better leverage your time, that sort of stuff. So we do a lot of trying of different tools. We do a lot of building prototypes and things like that. And then you start to see through that, what the signal looks like, and then you can better recognize what comes after that, right? I think a good example of that is probably a tool called Lovable, lovable.dev, that we came across last year. It seems like we've had it for years now, which we've built. But basically, that's a tool that lets anybody build software, right? You just describe what you want, and it builds it. Yeah, I was talking to Steve last night. Didn't use Lovable, but built a whole piece of software. And I'm hearing more and more and more, and we're trying to show people, that you can do it. But that was sort of a good example of one of the many tools that we were hearing about. And thankfully, it was actually Glenn who dug into that one after we tried it, and it wasn't that good, actually. That's another good thing that happens in AI. It wasn't very good at all. And then the next week, we tried it again, and it was transformative, a transformative tool. Yeah, so we have an enterprise account among the staff. We have over 100 different people on the staff that are non-technical, probably way more, actually. I think probably more like 250, 300 that are non-technical, but subject matter experts. Like Steve's a subject matter expert. You're subject matter experts, and you can build yourself a great piece of software. And it sounds nuts, but I see it all the time. So that was maybe a tangent there, but that was a good example of a tool that we found amongst the noise. And the biggest thing for us, and really for anybody, is if you see something that sounds like it could be promising, give it a quick go. And you might find something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Seth. So, I
Yeah.
mean, agents must just realize they don't have to use everything, but they must choose something that works for them.
That's a great example. Great point, actually. So the other thing is, don't get overwhelmed by the number of things that come out, and don't get overwhelmed by the noise that you hear in the industry, in the AI industry or the real estate industry. If you have something that you are using, an AI tool that you're using and it's helping you, great, you're already winning. You know,
Yeah.
you don't need to worry about finding the next thing, or maybe you're not doing enough. Doing something is already a win, right? And that's great. And then next time you have a little bit of opportunity and you dig into something else, you might find another thing, and now you're winning, twice as much as you were before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so don't fret about, maybe you're using the old version of something. If you like ChatGPT, great. You don't have to switch to Claude.
Yeah, just
Right?
start.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So another one to you. EXP was the first virtual brokerage
Mhm.
and is now leading in tech and AI. What challenge comes along with being first, and why is that worth to our agents?
So, well, it's important to keep pushing, right? To keep innovating. EXP got to where it is because it was a new idea and it was innovative and it was groundbreaking. And along the way, um, Glenn initially and all of us now have discovered things that come up in a new business model or new, when you're pioneering something, you find new problems that nobody had to deal with before. So we have that for sure, right? So if you think of something like AI coding, vibe coding, we're using that in an industrialized way. We're building a lot of software at EXP using just AI, right? Non-technical staff are able to build really cool pieces of software. But that makes the delivery speed exponentially faster than it was before. So we're now in an uncharted territory, and it solves maybe 50 pain points for us to be able to build software that way, but will create or uncover 3 problems that have never existed in all of humanity before. So that's just part of the process. That means you're on the right path. If you're an innovator, if you're a pioneer, you're gonna bump into some stuff that nobody's had to bump into before, and you figure out how to solve it. You invent the solutions as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being the innovator on our behalf. I mean, it must be
Absolutely.
uncomfortable at some times, I'm sure.
This is a company of innovators, though.
I know.
That's the cool thing.
And that's what gives us all
Yeah.
the advantage out
That's
there
right.
in the field.
That's
It's
right.
just great.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's right.
Javi, we're on to the next question. If our AI assistant was just working properly, so I could get a bit of a scroll. I can't remember what the next question is.
Can you read there?
I
Over
can,
50.
I can. Oh, there you go. See. Okay, yeah, that's the one. So now again, I mean, with all the noise, with everything, here's something every agent does need to hear. If we're feeling overwhelmed, our instinct is to shelve things. We're just agents, right? If we're feeling overwhelmed by something, we'd rather just shelve it and just carry on, same old, same old. Now, in your opinion, what's the risk of doing that and doing nothing about AI and technology?
Andre, I think it's like looking back years ago when we started using cell phones, and I say to you, I'm too afraid to use this thing that doesn't have a cord and doesn't have a line, and and the same with fax machines. It's the same thing. It's technology, and it grows. So if you don't grow with it, you are going to become the the person that and the agent that's not informed. And and we have to realize our clients, they are using the same tools. Your buyers and your sellers are using the same tools. So you have to make sure that you follow the trends, that you know how to use these tools so that you can, again, be a trusted source. If you're going to go to a client to sell a property and against another agent that's using AI, and he's going to use stats and he's going to provide a lot of information, and you go in there with no information, and you're going to look like the agent that is not informed.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to lose that environment where you're the trusted source. So I think that's the biggest risk for anybody that's not using AI. You are going to fall behind, and you're not going to be the trusted source.
Yeah. So standing still and doing nothing is a decision. but it's the
Decision.
wrong decision.
Yeah.
Definitely the wrong decision. Okay, one for you again, Seth. How do you go about getting just everyday agents, not just sort of tech fans, but just
Yeah.
everyday agents to actually move over to actually use the AI tools that are there and available to them?
Yep, it's a good question. I think a lot of people are intimidated because it's new, right? And
Yeah.
it's in AI is increasingly more powerful and useful. So there's a lot of new stuff coming out. It can just be intimidating, but the good news is that generally speaking, most AI tools that we create that bucket for are the easiest things to possibly use, right? Nothing's ever been easier. You just talk to it.
Mm.
So I think I try to just give those examples whenever I see anybody that says, oh, I'm going to hire somebody to do this, or I'm going to, I can't do it. I can't build a piece of software. And I can ask them, well, what would you tell somebody to build for you? And then they'll tell me that, and I'll say, just copy paste what you just said into
Yeah.
into Lovable, and it will build it for you, and that's it. And that's just the nature of AI tools. Nothing has ever been this powerful. Nothing has ever been this easy. And that's kind of the nice thing. They're very intuitive. My mom uses ChatGPT day to
Yeah.
day. My 8-year-old son uses ChatGPT on his tablet to ask about Minecraft every single day. So it's the gambit there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you again. I think we've got to wrap up if I'm looking at the clock now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we can just wrap up and say relationships are still very, very important, and AI is going to free up our time to really form that relationships and take it further.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you to people like you for just shaping the industry for us. It's been very enlightening. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody here. Just the fact that you're here, I think, indicates that our industry is in good hands.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I specialize in luxury homes in Waterfall Equestrian. Well, not only Equestrian estate, but the whole of Waterfall. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to actually share my experiences, ideas, collaborate, connect with everybody. And I actually want to introduce you to an awesome woman that we rely on quite a lot. And I just got to know her while I was sitting in the backstage. But it's so important for us as agents, when it comes to data. We rely a lot on data in order to convert it to sales. But I wanted to just say something to you in terms of luxury real estate. I enjoy luxury real estate because it's a lot of fun. I get to show buyers homes that they will never ever clean. But I also earn big commission when it comes to selling luxury homes. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Hayley Ivans Downs. If data had a personality and a work ethic, it would be Hayley. With over 30 years shaping how decisions are made in property and information services, she brings strategy, insight, and relationship building like no other. She is the managing executive for real estate at Lightstone, leading with a rare mix of strategic thinking and a deep understanding of how information drives business success. So if you want to grow smarter, make better decisions, and turn data into real value, you're in the right place. Welcome to the brilliant and always insightful Hayley Ivans-Downs. She gave me the permission to say Hayley ID. So, Hayley, welcome on stage.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, everybody. It's such a privilege to be here and to be talking around data, which is something close to my heart. I've been involved with data for many years, and I don't think anybody can really make a decision without understanding data. Let's get going. So probably just to sum it all up, let's just start off with a phrase. Data turns uncertainty into insight, insight into action, and action into advantage, which really summarizes data. You can sit with a wealth of data, but if you're not doing anything with it, it's just sitting there. We need to create insight out of it. And I think that's something that Lightstone does exceptionally well. I did a bit of a deep dive into terms of data, in terms of understanding how much data is out there, and I learned a term about a zettabyte. So they speak around 149 zettabytes of data that we're sitting with around us. I think just to understand what a zettabyte is, I had a look. It's 21 zeros. So if you know a million is 6, this is 21. I think just to give a quantum in the size of data that is around us all the time. And the biggest piece of that is all your smartphones, your social media, your Internet of Things, the cloud. We know and we see it all the time. I think we're all experiencing AI at the moment, and under AI underpins all of this data. It gives us a lot more information for us to work with and understand. At Lightstone, very high-level snapshot, we have a wealth of data ourselves, specifically around property, specifically around address information, suburb information, location, as well as things such as age groups, demographics, all of that information that underpins the property and understanding the market. We basically have nearly 100% coverage of property information going back 3 decades, which I think is a wealth of information. We've obviously been in the business for about 21 years, which also then just speaks to our understanding of data and how we work with it. Also the wealth of street addresses that we have, as well as the ongoing updates that we continue doing on a weekly basis. If we get into some market stock information, this wouldn't be an opportunity for Lightstone to speak without giving some of our stats and something that we obviously known for. So just overall, kind of a view in terms of what it looks like in terms of the landscape. So we're sitting at 8.56 million properties, divided between your residential and non-res. You can see the percentages there. On the right is basically the value of those. So if you can kind of understand, the value at the bottom versus the res and non-res, to the right is the division into your freehold, sectional title, and estate. Really important just to understand what that looks like, and once again, the value of that. I think the interesting piece there is always to look at an estate and understand the value in an estate. Really in South Africa, what we see is that people are paying 50% more to live in an estate as opposed to a freehold, which in itself is also really interesting, and that speaks to lifestyle and security. I think principally the two pieces. Where does all of this property exist? Where does it sit? So if we look at volume, we're sitting at Gauteng, we're sitting in Western Cape. Those are the two highest. KZN coming in third, and the same in terms of value. So once again, we can see Gauteng, Western Cape. The interesting thing for me that I've seen over the last 10 years is the growth in value in the Western Cape. And that we can obviously see very much, everybody's heard the term of semigration, and that we've seen obviously really kick off after our 2020, our good old COVID. We saw that really pick up, and we can kind of see that change. That's kind of sitting. A lot of people moved to the Western Cape. We had an ability where people didn't need to be in the office for a time. We're starting to see that change slowly. We're starting to see people moving back to the office. But we can still see basically people hybrid. They can basically remotely work. Also very interesting is bonded. Everybody has a view around how many bonded properties we have in the landscape. So volume, 30% of the properties in the country are bonded. We look at the value, slightly different picture, a lot of value sitting in bonded properties. So, and that at the bottom speaks to the bars at the bottom in terms of the wealth segment. You can obviously see the super luxury in terms of volume, but then you look at the value of it as well as the luxury. So that's where quite a big portion of the bonds are sitting, but also quite interesting just to know that 30% of the property is bonded. Always inherently you think it's more, but it's actually less. Age of buyers. This is really interesting stat. We've been tracking it. So 10 years ago, the average age of a buyer was sitting at about 30 years old. We're now sitting at 38. So that actually speaks to your property market being a little bit more under pressure. So if you think of when people are going to be buying property for the first time or buying into the property market, at the age of 38, it's a lot later in a life cycle, life stage, which really then speaks to the market being a little bit more harder to find those properties to sell. So really interesting to understand that. Automated valuation models. So this, for us, is really the heartbeat of Lightstone. Lightstone really started around building a valuation model that the banks use now in terms of the process of granting of bonds, and they have for 20 years. We have obviously enhanced it to become an AIVM model, and I'll talk through that a bit as we go through this. But it's really around transforming your property valuation. It's around being able to make quicker decisions and decisions that are not costing as much as they used to. So it's really important just to understand kind of the value of a valuation model. Various aspects that go into a valuation model. We speak around a whole list of data that we actually bring in as part of the process to build our models and keep refining them. This is a continual process. We are continually updating our model on a monthly basis through various data pieces coming in, and obviously back-checking it as well. We talk around predictive features of a model, and within our valuation model, we talk around two scores. There's a confidence score and there's a safety score. The confidence score is all around the probability and being accurate, how our estimate is in terms of the accuracy of the estimate through the various data pieces we have. A safety score is the percentage that we are not under predicting. Both of these scores become really important in the bank in terms of granting of a bond. So they assess our score, bearing in mind the valuation models data. We're obviously super excited because there's more and more data coming in through various sources. But obviously, and that becomes more important for the bank. The closer the accuracy is, they are lending against it. And once again, we recalibrate all the time and revise our estimates. Just a quick example, just to give you all a view, an estimate of value of $1 million. It goes through our model. We look at a confidence score. Possibly it could be at a 75%, which means we would be between 800 and 1.2 million in terms of that. And then obviously a safety score maybe sitting at 88%, which means we're confident that the market value will be greater than 900K. That is essentially how it gets used. And in some instances in the banks, they have their own rules. So for instance, a bank could say, we need a confidence score to be 85%, and we need the safety to be 90. And then we use the data to grant the bond. So each bank is different with their rules, but that's essentially how they use a valuation model. Just speaking around the different assessments, so we constantly back testing it with test data as well as real data that's come in. So properties that have sold comes in, we kind of go, how close were we to that estimate and what is it looking like? Constantly being tested, and that's how we constantly refine our model, and it gets better and better all the time. Just some additional information pieces that we started. This was kind of going back to 2018, 2019. We were looking at satellite and drone imagery just to kind of do some AI deep algorithm kind of testing, looking at images. So trying to understand, type of roof. So is it tile, is it thatch, is it tin, what is it? Is there a swimming pool? All of those elements that you can pick up through imagery, we bring all of that in. We then obviously combine it with all of our other sets of data, AI enhanced. We have obviously been using AI since 2019, just to refine the model. And then we obviously get increased coverage and accuracy all the time. Area under roof becomes really important as well. This is not something that is captured within a deed. Your sectional title obviously is captured in terms of size of square meter, but an actual freehold is not captured. So this is where it becomes important for us to try and capture the area under roof, which is something that we can do through imagery. Just on the side to that, we also obviously created some level of modeling around prediction on fires, some of the weather hazards that we've kind of used within insurance purposes and insurance companies, just to help them in terms of understanding premiums that need to be paid and what that looks like. Property values. So from a Lifestone perspective, we're constantly looking at inflation. So what is the growth of your properties within certain areas? So this basically gives a view in terms of your national inflation, Western Cape, Gauteng, KZN. You start kind of getting a sense in terms of where some of the values are and the percentage growth. Obviously the red line is your Western Cape. You can see the dip 2009 when there was that crisis that hit. We can see COVID in 2020. And then you can see kind of the pickup thereafter. I think the thing for us there is just to keep in mind that this is constantly updating. We update it on a monthly basis to give everybody a view in terms of what's happening with property prices and the value thereof. We've obviously seen quite a bit of change here with COVID, which has been really interesting. So after COVID, we had those 2 years of really boom. And I'm sure you all kind of, those that have been around for a while, back end of 2020 to kind of beginning of 2022, it was really a buoyant market. We actually saw a lot of activity, which was really fantastic. Interest rates were at an all-time low, the lowest they've been in 50 years, and that obviously inspired people to buy properties. We have subsequently seen the interest rates change, and that obviously has affected property markets. We've gone from kind of buying, selling to more renting again, but hopefully seeing that come down now with the interest rates coming down, and we've started to see the property market starting to pick up again, which is always a good thing. Something just to be aware of, we're always looking at the macroeconomic views, so those are always aspects that we bring in. Your GDP, your interest rates, your inflation all play a part in terms of understanding the inflation on property and how it's growing. So they all affect, all of these economic indicators affect what that looks like. And that's all part of our model. Just something around property transfers and price performance. So this is something just to kind of look at and be aware of. Volume of transactions versus value of transactions. Once again, you can see 2020 with COVID, kind of the dip, and then the kind of pick up, those buoyant years that I was speaking about. You can see the graphs like really picking up in terms of value, in terms of volume. We then start to see it going down slightly. A little bit of up and down. You can see 2024, there was a little bit of a flicker. 2025, we're picking up. So just be mindful that we're in 2026 now, and essentially there is a bit of a lag with the deeds. But yeah, it is picking up, which is a good thing. Speaking just around bonded properties, just a view in terms of what that looks like at different segments. So we look at the mid-value, we look at luxury, high value, super luxury. What does it look like in terms of proportion? Obviously, you can see the highest bonded pieces are your high value. The lowest is obviously which is quite interesting, the super luxury. And just to get a view in terms of what that looks like, it's obviously very much linked to the activity in the market. So you can see the spikes there 2020 through to 2022 when there was lots of activity, lots of bonds. And then we started to see a tapering off as the property market has been adjusting with interest rates increased. And that will start also hopefully seeing change now as those interest rates are coming down, which will encourage consumers to once again look at purchasing property. Something that's always interesting is time on market. So how long does it take for properties to sell? And always to compare across the different provinces. And just to look on the other side is the percentage of asking price versus what gets achieved. Once again, you can see kind of time, days on market. You can see Gauteng kind of really kind of spiking up there in terms of how long it's actually taking. So the higher that is, the longer it's taking for a property sale. And then once again, kind of what are the asking prices being achieved compared to the listing? And you can see that's also a drop-off. Completely different in the Western Cape. So Western Cape, days on market, 80s, between 75 and 80 days. Your Gauteng, you're looking at about 90. And then if you can kind of see percentage of asking price, you can see kind of the Gauteng is sitting just under 90%, and then your Western Cape is sitting at between 91 and 92. So closer to the value in terms of being attained, which once again just speaks to demand. It speaks to people wanting to live in the Western Cape, and so they're willing to pay more. We also then looked across age groups just to understand bonded transactions and where that's actually sitting. Makes sense that the biggest bonded transactions are sitting 18 to 35. And then the graph on your right is essentially time on market versus the price being achieved and across the different provinces. And it just speaks again to that demand that I was mentioning. The little blue squares are essentially price paid, the percentage. And then obviously the blue bars are average days on market. So obviously Northern Cape is taking the longest in terms of selling and the lowest in terms of the percentage being attained from listing. And then I just wanted to spend a little bit of time here steering the future. So trusted AI revolution, this is really important just in terms of kind of Lightstone and the AI that we use. We have essentially 3 pillars that we work off. Pillar 1 is transparency. It becomes really important to understand the AI that's in the model and that can be understood and interrogated. And obviously from a human intervention point of view, we have valuers that look at the model within the banks all the time to decide whether it's going to be a desktop decision, whether the model is the decision, whether it's a physical valuation that gets done. So that happens all the time, and there is a human in the loop. So essentially it's around interrogating and understanding, and it's not to replace, but to rather provide confidence scores that I've spoken about to help the decision move along. Pillar 2 is all about integrity. So Lightstone is essentially Africa's only member of European AVM Alliance. So this was a really big feather in our cap. We are the ones sitting in the European Alliance at the table with them that have quarterly meetings. And essentially our AVM was thoroughly tested to make sure that it went through all of the correct channels and there's rigor and independence around it. We refer to narrow AI, which is really just around an AI methodology really focused on a pinpoint. We are trying to get the most accurate understanding of evaluation of a residential property. And so the narrow AI gives us that ability to really focus on that. So it's not a broad AI. And then outcomes is obviously banking efficiency. Having a valuation model that really assists the banks in making a decision just makes it faster. It's faster for the consumer, it's faster for the buyer-seller, as well as less costs involved, which is really important. And obviously higher approval rates, which can also then assist. And then sharper pricing intelligence. We talk around automotive and high accuracy site selection. So within Lightstone, we've got an auto sector, which we look after, so Lightstone Auto. We obviously also do valuations around vehicles. And then on the retail side, we do a lot of site selection for retailers to understand where they need to be. All of that is probably coming out of our data modeling, which is all important for our clients to understand. And then just kind of a closeout, we are obviously merging a lot of this data across property, auto, and retail to create an intelligent value chain across all 3 sectors, turning South Africa's robust data into competitive advantage. And for you, our clients, to be using data and information that assists you on a daily basis to ensure that you are selling the properties that you need to be selling, and price counseling with those clients and ensuring that they understand around the prices. So Lightstone is your independent partner for that, and really we are here to assist you. and we simplify the complex. And that is my story. Thank you very much.
Welcome, welcome, EXPCOn 2026.
Hello, EXPCon 2026. I still cannot hear you. Come on.
A little bit louder.
Thank you so much.
Guys, today we have the privilege of introducing someone who's truly represented what it means to be limitless. Someone who has built a success across borders, industries, and in creative worlds.
And just waiting for my slide. Our guest is a high-performing real estate agent with EXP Realty. Recognized not only for production, but for leadership, mentorship, and impact. She's passionate about helping agents build businesses that are scalable, sustainable, and aligned to who they truly are. She's a global educator and mentor, known for authenticity, depth, and ability to connect. She doesn't just teach strategy, she helps people grow with intention and confidence.
Next slide. But what makes her story exceptional and honestly unforgettable is that real estate is only one of her arenas where she shines. Next slide.
Okay, listen, I just want to say, as she looks here, is not photoshopped. This is her face. She's truly beautiful. So alongside her real estate career, she also have international recognized recording artist, and she's a songwriter with music that has charted globally and earned her a Grammy nomination.
Next slide. For those of us here in South Africa, her journey matters. It reminds us that EXP is truly globally, and that her background doesn't limit you, your location doesn't define you, and your voice can reach the world if you're willing to work. Next slide. EXP Cape Town.
Please welcome Ray Ruth.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure.
Hello, South Africa. It has been, yes, hi. How's everybody doing? No. I know there's only, how's everyone feeling? It is so good to be here. You guys, it took us about 24 hours to get to this moment. And I jumped on a plane and fly 14 hours here, though, just to experience this amazing city, because it is amazing. And this country is amazing. It is amazing. But I'm here in this exact moment and in this place because I want you to become everything you ever dreamed about becoming in real estate. Let me start here with a question, okay? How many of you came into real estate for freedom? Now I need to see hands. Honestly, time freedom, financial freedom, pick it. How many of you, right? And then how many of you realize you accidentally signed up for a very intense, very stressful, very unpaid mentorship? Same. Before you go any further, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to take out your phone and open up notes or open up a voice message, or if you're like me, get a pen and a paper, because this is going to be Real Estate Growth 101. Former teacher, can't help myself. So I wanted to there's a lot of motivation, momentum. It's how I got to a 7-time icon. So at the end of the time, I'm also going to give you the breakdown for my 157 rule. It's the rule that I live by in my business, and it's how I have scaled intentionally. It's how I coach agents around the world to scale, and it's how you are going to take what I'm saying and be able to take it into your day-to-day business and grow. Here's the truth, guys. Write this down. This is so important. Here comes the teacher. Write this down, okay? We only monetize what we manage. Let that sink in. We can only monetize what we manage. I'm going to ask you a question. What did you think about your business this past weekend? What did you think? Did you think the economy was slow? Did you think there were no clients? Did you wonder how hard it was going to be to find clients? See, real estate, you guys, is one of the greatest vehicles for wealth on the planet, but only when you learn how to move. We have to learn how to move correctly. Most agents don't fail because they're not capable. That's not why most agents fail. Most agents fail because they stay stuck. They're stuck mentally, they're stuck emotionally, right? How many emotions do we have in our deals and our clients have? They're stuck strategically. They're waiting on things that you were never meant to wait for. That's why my entire philosophy is based on 3 words, and I love that this entire event embodied 2 of them. But my entire philosophy is based off of new, now, and next. All right? And if you learn to live inside those 3 words in your business is going to get lighter, it's going to get faster, and it's going to be a whole lot more profitable. All right, let's start with my story though. Who am I? How the heck did I get here? I want you to understand, I didn't grow up in a household where around the table we were discussing business ideas, entrepreneurial ideas. That's not what was passed around at our dinner table. Instead, what was passed around was food and a lot of love, right? Who identifies? No business parents, no business family, right? My parents were teachers. Solid, stable, service driven. That's what I grew up with. And for 15 years, I followed that path because we do what we know, right? I taught at the university level and I still love education. I love helping people grow, but entrepreneurship, not my background, not my baby, and that wasn't my training and it wasn't my safety net, right? So I had no financial backing, I had no cushion, but I jumped in when I left my country at 19 to come to America to get my first degree, just the clothes on my back and a dream, right? Who's not from the country that they live in? Anybody? It's totally different when you move to a new country and then try to start a business. So everything that you've seen that I've ever built, if anyone looked me up, anything that you see that I have, I built myself. I did it from scratch. So if you look at the QR codes that they may or may not have up on the screen, it's okay. If you look at the QR codes, you can look me up and you can see everything that I have, I did. So if you haven't identified with me yet, hopefully you're going to identify with me now. When you understand that I had no financial net underneath me. I used to stay awake at night. Who's done this, staying awake at night, wondering where their next deal's coming from because they need to pay bills? Right? Who's woke up late at night thinking, where am I going to get my business from? Because you understand no one's coming to save you. There's no phone call to make. There's no other business to fall into. There's no safety rope. It is just you. And you have to figure out how to make it work anyway. So if you're thinking, oh, that's great, she must be on stage because she had a leg up in life, I didn't. And that we all have an opportunity now to learn how to grow and scale, which is why I'm going to put in the next way that you can learn how to pay your bills and move through your business successfully with clear understanding that you know how to move, all right? Because nothing is going to move for us until we learn how to move. All right, so let's move in to how this is going to happen. There was a time in my career when I was doing all the things. All the things. Who feels like they've done the most? All the posting, all the networking. You've showed up at every event they told you to come to. You've attended every meeting that they told you to attend. But nothing feels productive. You just feel very busy. And here's the problem. Busy doesn't always move the needle. That's when I realized something really uncomfortable. I wasn't running a business. The business was running me. What I actually needed was how to create momentum. And the answer, you guys, the answer is not more hustle. That's not the answer. The answer is clarity. And that's when I developed the new, the now, and the next. I've been coaching this for 2 years, and it became my operating system. So let's talk about new. I don't know if you guys know this, but new is not a tactic. It's 2 very important things. New is mindset, and it's also action. But let's first talk about mindset. I asked you earlier, what did you think about your business this past weekend? Right? If you thought it was slow, if you thought it was difficult, if you thought it was challenging, chances are that's exactly what your business is. Slow, difficult, and challenging. Your mindset actually directly reflects what happens in your business on a day-to-day basis. But here's the important thing, you guys. Most agents are living in one of 2 places. You're either living in a competitive plane or a creative plane, but you can't be in both at the same time. And here's what you need to know. The competitive plane looks at the person next to you in this room and says, I wonder how they got all their listings. I wonder how they're so successful. I wonder what they're doing to be. You're focused on something else, someone else, all right? That is the competitive spirit, the competitive plane. The creative plane lives in a completely different place. This is where you're asking questions. This is where you're saying, what can I do to build my business? What can I do to grow? What can I do to achieve something different in my, that creative place is the only place that new, lasting business comes from. You can get business in the competitive space, but lasting business comes from creative. So write this down. This is important. What you think about, you bring about. Literally, your thoughts will create your reality. It's so important. I need you to know this. We don't attract new business by thinking that business is missing. We don't attract new business by worrying about the guy next to me. You guys, when I was running to EXPCON, I set my head down and I didn't look to the left or to the right. For a full year, I told myself for 12 months, I'm not going to hear anyone talk about the economy. It's saturated. There's too many agents. I was not listening to a minute of it. Put my head down and I said, I'm going to focus on my goal. And my goal could only be achieved by getting new what? New names and new numbers. You guys, our business lives and dies by new names and new numbers. That's new conversations, new reach, new energy. This is how we thrive, a new perspective. Guys, it's not something that should overwhelm you, but it should be something that excites you, because I'm about to challenge each one of you. Today, when you leave this convention, I want you to determine that for the next 12 months, 365 days, every single day, you're going to find a new name and a new number of somebody that needs help. Think about what happens when you do that. You suddenly move from an empty funnel to completely full funnel. And I love this because it's not overwhelming, it's just intentional. Think about this, guys. You used to work for someone that made you show up at a job. Maybe you didn't, but most of you might have. Where you had to show up at a job and clock in and work for their dream, right? Work 8 hours for them. How many of you get up and work that hard for yourself? What if you got up every day and said, I'm not going to stop working today until I find a new name and a new number? Let me tell you, I sat at Starbucks today in Cape Town, was getting ready for this, drinking a latte, and looking around, and there were all these people are passing me by, and I thought, if I moved to Cape Town, I would sit here and I would try to introduce myself to the people walking by, because I thought every one of those people has an entire network of people who need help. They know someone moving into the area. They know somebody that needs a home. They know someone who just lost a loved one. They know someone downsizing, upsizing. Now imagine every nucleus that you're connected to, that you were to just ask, start a conversation. Do you know anyone who needs help? And then say what? Help buying a house. Do you know anyone who's moving, relocating? Because here's the thing. If you say, do you know anyone who needs to buy or sell? People just blank. They phase out. When you ask specific questions, the wheels turn and they start to find answers. All right, so now that we've got everyone with the new, we need 365 new people, right? Now that we know that, let's talk about now. New fills your pipeline, but now pays your bills, okay? And I need you guys to learn this. Most of the clients, when we get them, we want them to be now clients. Have you ever had that? You meet somebody and you're like, we're house hunting, we're looking, and then 3 weeks in, they go, oh, we're going to wait 6 months. And you're like, wait, because you've already looked at, they love the houses, and you've basically already cashed in that check and paid something, right? And you're like, no, I need you to, here's what if I could sit each one of you down and just take this that I had to train myself to do and give it to you, it would be to say to you, when any client comes in, detach yourself from the outcome. And then that way, you are never upset. Because guess what? You went 3 weeks looking at property, but I told you to get a new person every day. So you're 3 weeks into new people. You're like, cool. Call me in 6 months. I'm going to have a bill to pay then, and you're going to help me pay it. Because I got guy from last week looking at houses. Do you see how that works? Detach. Your job is to identify each client and their needs. That's your job. And success loves speed. The quicker you can put people into the places that they need to be, because it's their life and their journey, right? You're the tour guide. You're not meant to tell their story. Most agents burn out because they treat every single lead like a now lead. Not everyone's going to be ready, and you need to be so okay with that. I still coach agents now who say, oh, I know, we're going to write an offer. I know it's coming. We're writing an offer. And then the next day, oh, they want to wait. Oh, they want to wait, you know that feeling? Negative. Okay? We don't want that feeling. It's like, oh, they want to wait. Cool. Who's next? Right? We're going to get to that in a second, though. Now, clients don't need pressure. They're going to be ready, and you're going to know. They just need your presence. They need you to find them, and they need you to respond quickly. Book quickly, show quickly, write an offer, get them going. Your next level in real estate and in our company, and your ability to icon does not depend on the market. It depends on your consistency and getting new people every single day, new names and numbers. I hope if you come up and talk to me just now, I'm going to say to you, how many new clients did you get this week? But I'm at a conference, doesn't matter. I sat at Starbucks and could have met people, right? All right, now let's talk about next. This is not an offensive thing. It's not that we're upset, we're saying next, right? Most agents avoid next. Why do we avoid it? Because we're losing money. Don't we feel that way? If you tell somebody, if you let someone go, that was a payday. Next is not that, though. It's a discipline. Guys, some clients are not going to be ready. Some clients aren't going to be qualified. Some clients, and how many have these, just want you to drive around and look at houses for fun, right? They're just not serious. That's okay, but then it's not. Like, your gas matters, right? So learn how to identify these people. Some people are just lovely humans who aren't ready. Facing the wrong client is the minute that the right one can't find you. I'm going to repeat that, because this is how you let it go. Every minute, write it down, every minute you spend chasing the wrong client, trying to pull them through, trying to get them to want to buy a house, all that energy is another minute that you can't allow the right one to come find you. You're distracted over here. All right? Here's what Next does. It protects your energy. We have limited energy. It protects your pipeline. It protects your resources. It protects, and this is the most important one, it protects your confidence. How hard is it when you've got a month, 2 months, 3 months with no closings? What does that do to your confidence? Shakes you, right? We need to be consistent, not just to pay bills, but our mindset requires it, all right? And that confidence is going to attract better clients to you. So just so you know, I'm not unlike you guys. I still sell houses. I iconed 7 years. This year will be my 8th running for Icon, and I still write music, and I still do 100 other things. But here's the thing. I've learned that if I'm able to work with intention, my business never fails. It never falters. I'm in South Africa, and my business is still moving. I'm still selling houses. I'm still showing them, I know, virtually. But I'm still working, right? That's the beauty about our job. So let's talk about how I went from a side hustle to full-time. How many people are full-time in real estate? Let me see. Okay, now how many people are, it's just halfway? It's okay, no shame in that, guys. I started halfway. I started that way. I was still teaching university when I first started real estate. I wasn't all in yet. I was splitting my focus. I was treating real estate kind of like a side gig. I wasn't intentional about it, but I was selling, if that makes sense to you. I probably did about 4 houses a year my first year, which might seem like a lot, but in my network, it was quite low. That's because focus, you guys, is the tax that you pay for growth. Process that. Focus is the tax you pay for growth. But see, everything changed. And May 31st of 2018, I lost my job teaching for the summer. Class load was low. So I looked around, I was like, I have a license. I better figure out how to use it, right? That's when I became intentional, because suddenly real estate wasn't a side chapter, it was the main event. I had bills coming in June that I didn't know how I was going to pay. I had no clients. I had no contracts. So you know what I did? I sat down and I looked at the next 90 days, and I said, okay, if I find one client every single day, I could foreseeably close 2 houses in June I'm sorry, in July, and 5 houses in August. That would be 7. I want you to know this is so important. Do you hear I just set goals? We're going to talk about goals in just a second. I had that conversation with myself and I listened to my gut. I said, could I close 2 in July? And I was like, yes. I was like, can I close 5 in August? Because at that point, I'm like, that's 60 days of me talking and finding new people. I could totally do that, right? I closed 7 houses in 90 days. And that's what I built my blueprint from, you guys. The blueprint is actually what I have used and repeated. I don't if you meet me in person, you may see a scar on my face. November this year, I was bit on the face by a dog. Sorry, November of last year. How did I do that this year? Last year. I was bit in the face by a dog and I got 9 stitches. I couldn't speak. I couldn't smile. For the entire month of December, I couldn't work. What happens when we don't engage in our business? Ooh, I lost everything. But you know what I realized? Even as I was losing everything, I was like, I know how to pick this back up. I know how to reboot. And I rebooted in January. Here's what I learned. You want to work smarter, not harder. So the model I'm going to share with you really quick, it doesn't exhaust you, it empowers you. So once you understand it, no matter what tragedy happens in your life that pulls you away from a business that requires your hands on, you'll be able to take this and rebuild. So let me give you the framework I still use today. I just used it in January for growth. Growth doesn't come from doing more, you guys. It comes from doing what matters. Make that distinction, okay? So, first thing, the one of the one, what one is, one goal. You guys, do you know how many people I've asked, I've walked up to you and said, hey, what's your goal this year? These are agents. I don't know. Yeah, a number? Is there something what we manage, we monetize. What's your goal for the next 12 months? If you haven't talked to me, I'm going to ask you, what's your goal? You need a number. Okay, I like to work by closes. You could work by GCI, it's up to you. I like closes. I want to close 45 houses this year. Sound crazy? Anything is only crazy if you can't believe it, right? So I did that by making it a priority. Here's the thing, if you don't do what I'm suggesting with the 157, 3 years of your business is going to go by, and in 5 years, you're going to wonder why you haven't scaled yet. I remember I was a realtor for a year and a half, and I was like, why have I not done much? Time flies if you're not monitoring it, all right? This is where we get to the 5. The really important thing about the 5 is, and this is going to be a lot, soak it in, you need 5 ways that every single week you're getting brand new names and numbers. 5. Now, you might like, Renee, I've got 1. It's my friends. It's my past clients. It's okay. I coach agents all the time that have 1 and 2. We work together to develop 3, 4, 5. They're out there, you guys. They're out there. You need 5. It could be social media conversations. Learn how to leverage social media. Guys, in Miami in October, they said on stage, if you are not online in the next 2 to 5 years, your business will disappear. Everybody's moving online, right? Past clients, agents, show houses. Here's the thing. You may say, Renee, those don't work for me. Okay. My 5 are not going to look like your 5, not just because I live in another country, but because I'm just a different person, which means all your 5s, everyone sitting next to you is going to look different than yours, but you need 5. Once you've got 5 ways, you can start to build a business that you can depend on. Income becomes predictable, and you stop having the stress. Do you see how that works? Then we want to talk about the 7. Okay, here's what most people fall off. We have to monitor those 5 ways. Because what worked 2 months ago may dry up and not stop and not work. So I encourage agents at the end of every week, look at your 5 or your 3 or your 2, whatever you're building to, look at them and see how many people came in. How many people were you able to meet through those ways? And if they start to die, guys, the name of the game is next. Next, find another one. We are in a constant shift in our business. Everything is always shifting. Just like our houses, they're not worth last year what they were worth this year. So learn how to shift in your business. Here's what I need you to know. A messy system that's intentional beats any ability to be perfect in this business. Just be messy, just start. You don't need to rebuild your business. Just start and pivot today. So this is why the 157 works. It removes that overwhelmed feeling of what do I do every day? What do I do all week? What am I trying to achieve, right? It creates a clear direction. It makes growth manageable because, remember, only what we manage can we monetize. Do you see how important that is? So if you manage your goals, your lead sources, your days, you're going to scale even when the market rates went to 8% in the US, which is very high. I don't know if it's ever been that high here, probably. But it went really high, from 2 to 8, almost overnight. And I sold just as much that year because I pivoted. Where are the cash buyers? Where are the people that have to move? Like, expand your thinking about where you want to go. And that's how you stop chasing success and start directing to it. So let me wrap this up before I get off stage. Real estate doesn't need more busy agents. We don't need you out there busy, all right? Real estate needs brave agents, all right? Agents who are brave enough to let go, brave enough to give up on fear, brave enough to not worry, but more importantly, brave enough to believe in that they have everything that they need inside them to succeed. Your belief is critical. In fact, I'm releasing a song today while I'm in Cape Town called I Believe. If you hit that QR code, you'll be able to find it. But I want you to know something. I only had 30 minutes. I could go on. They made it very clear in the back I can't, though. So, very clear. So I want to still be able to sing my song. So I want every single person here to leave this conference knowing that you need these into your business. Your business is going to change. You're going to have a new future. You're going to have now funds that will pay your bills, and you're going to have the next mentality that will protect your power. Remember, we want to build a lifestyle, you guys, that's going to give us freedom, right? Everybody said they came for freedom. I have quickly given you every tool I've ever used to create the freedom I have in my life. And so I want you to know that you're all, the song I'm going to sing is called Magical. And I want to know it's important because the song was written about changing the narrative. I want you to change the narrative of your life. I want you to change the narrative of your business. I know South Africa knows a lot about changing narrative, about many things, you guys. We need to be in the business of changing the narrative of our lives to write the story we want to tell. So I'm going to get the guys to cue up the song while I grab my mic. Thank you for letting me sing, too. Thank you. This song's called Magical. Just want to make sure I can hear it. Can I get a little more mic up there? Light up the sky in living color. Side by side, we stand as one.
Very good afternoon, everybody, and a warm welcome. Lovely to see everybody. Can I ask you to please give Renee a massive, massive round of applause? As I'm sure you'll know, she is one of your own, one of the agents, and I've just been chatting to Andrew Thompson backstage, and apparently next year's conference, every single member of the EXP family is going to be singing on stage, so there's something to look forward to in 2027. My name is Dan Nicol, and thank you all very much for being here this afternoon at the end of what's been, I believe, a very busy, very successful day with the EXP family. And it's very exciting for me to be here. For those of you who are not from South Africa, I live in a large tropical Venetian-like city called Johannesburg. It's kind of where everybody in Cape Town dreams of living one day, so that's where I call home. Great to have the South Africans here, great to have people from all over the world. We've got guests, I believe, from New Zealand, which makes our superstar rugby player coming up in just a moment very apt. Just in case you've forgotten, the Rugby World Cup has lived here for some time now. And we've also got a lot of guests from America, which is very exciting. I believe, is Wendy Forces here? Wendy, are you here? Wendy, right in front. So Wendy, I believe you're from Arizona. You live in Arizona, is that right? So Arizona is my third favorite American state after Canada and Greenland. So great to have you here. And welcome to you. Welcome to everybody. And thank you for two reasons. One, for staying on, for being part of the end of the afternoon, but also for supporting a cause that's very special to me and very special to our guests. And that cause, which those of you who ran yesterday evening will now be familiar with, is the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation. And in a nutshell, it's a platform that was started over 25 years ago that uses the power of sport for good to change lives around the world. The founding patron was Nelson Mandela. Our chairman is the great all-black rugby captain, Sean Fitzpatrick. And our chairman of Laureus in South Africa is our very special guest. I'm an ambassador for Laureus. He's a member of our World Academy, and he has an extraordinary track record. He is a Rugby World Cup winner. He's one of the greatest try scorers in history. He played 124 times for South Africa, and he's also a World Rugby Player of the Year. But today we see him not just through the lens of rugby, but also his career after rugby and a very successful move into the world of business. So a really exciting guest to bring up on stage. I will ask you to please give a thunderous welcome to Brian Habana.
Hello, Daniel.
Mr. Banner, grab a seat.
Hello, everybody.
I have to say, first of all, so Brian and I go back a long way. When I was a kid, I used to watch
Dan
him
for the
play.
first time 2 minutes ago.
First of all, this is the loosest shirt you will ever see Brian Habana wear. He normally wears ones he got for about his 14th birthday. That's kind of the Brian you see. And that many of you will have seen on the rugby field. And Brian, although there's a real focus today on having a look at your journey into business and how some of those learnings can reflect on the group we have here today, I would like to start very briefly with the rugby, because without rugby you wouldn't be where you are today. And getting into rugby, because if I look back to the start of the career and the very first team that Brian Habana played for, it was a particularly inauspicious start, and nobody would have said, this is somebody who's going to become one of the all-time greats of rugby union.
Dan, if you'd spoken to a 13-year-old Brian Habana in 1996 after experiencing the Rugby World Cup in South Africa in 1995 and played his first ever game of rugby for the under-14 G side at King Edward, so A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I probably would also not believe that I was going to have the career that I did. And you know, it's always great when you do finish your career that you get to reflect. And the journey is one that definitely wasn't done alone. And I think as a South African, seeing the impact of how sport changed my life, and where we're sitting here today as part of the Laureus family, how that lens becomes a lot more important than sometimes life, when you see the difference you can make in a child's dreams, hopes, and belief. And sports changed my life for the better. I was fortunate enough to travel the world, have fantastic opportunities, moments. But I think that the way in which it's changed our country, and no more more so than this past 6 or 7 years of the success of what the Springbok rugby team has done in a new generation where in 95 we only had Chester Williams, where people of colour in South Africa could really look up to, be inspired by, and now all of a sudden you got the likes of Sia Khaleesi, Cheslin Colby, Makazole Mapimpi, people that are just making the reality of becoming a professional athlete in South Africa is so much more tangible. And I got to be in Japan, in Tokyo, in 2019, witnessing that historic occasion, but just beaming with absolute pride that you've been a part of a legacy-driven foundation that has changed the face of South African rugby. So I am very much as big a box supporter now as what I was back in '95 when I got to witness that epic moment on the 20th of June and see South Africa change for the better, be inspired to pick up the game, be that inspiration, and then be a part of a country that is so fortunate to have a Springbok and a sporting nation that gives this country so much more unity, which is absolutely amazing.
You got to follow a dream and make that dream come true, and it's one that as kids, so many of us played out in backyards and back gardens. That very first game, you had the Springbok jersey, you got to represent your country for the first time. I know it's one that you still remember often because it was so special. Tell us about that day, about that feeling of becoming a Springbok.
So when I actually got announced in 2004, I'd never played Super Rugby before. My dad phoned me en route back home and he said, like, listen, you're going to be included into the Springbok team for the home leg of the Tri-Nations. Sort of looked at my watch. I was like, Dad, it's not the 1st of April. Stop lying to me. He goes, no, really. And I was actually going to a gala event that Friday with my now wife, then girl that I really wanted to become my wife. And I'll never forget sort of being at this gala event. It was for a hostel at Rao, and all my under 19 and under 20 mates. The news had just broken, and I was like this absolute heartthrob in this. I was learning to windsurf. So for those of you that don't come from South Africa, I went to King Edward's. I didn't know how to windsurf, and really needed to learn how to windsurf at Rand Afrikaans University. And it was just the talk of the town. And then getting to experience the Springboks beating New Zealand at Ellis Park that weekend where Maurice Joubert scored that hat-trick of tries. And even at that moment, when you don't have your cap for a Springbok, you have to wear your blazer over your arm, and so you're the only one without a blazer on. And just getting to witness what this team was doing under the guidance of Jake White and John Smith, and even in that moment, it still seems so far-fetched. And I get to tell people, because I get asked quite a bit, what is that best moment in your career? Is it winning? It is winning a Rugby World Cup. Are there any Sharks fans in the house? Sorry, Andrew, I know you are one as well. Is it beating the Sharks in the Super Rugby final in 2007? To become the first team from South Africa to win Super Rugby. Is it beating the All Blacks in New Zealand? And all those moments are incredible. But I tell people the best moment, without a doubt, was the 20th of November 2004, because when you have that dream that sometimes seems so far-fetched and you actually then get to achieve it, but you understand the hard work, the sacrifice, the support from loved ones to get to that moment and how critical that was in who you become as a person. But when you get to taste it for the very first time and you get to emphatically understand the privilege it is to represent yourself, your family, your country on the world's biggest stage, when you get to understand the accountability, but more importantly, the responsibility that you now were founded on to be able to represent your country, it was that moment that I realized getting to this point wasn't good enough. I wanted to be in this position for as long as possible, and all the hard work, all the effort, everything up until that point was no longer good enough. And I think the only way it could have been bettered on that day was if we actually went on to beat England at the home of rugby. We got absolutely annihilated 32-16, so I knew that I had to try stay in the jersey a bit longer to at least get a win under my belt. But that day was easily the best day of my life, after getting married and witnessing the birth of my 2 children. If any of you do chat to my wife. But it really was, in terms of rugby, the best moment that I could experience, because up until that point I knew how much it had taken to get there, but I just wanted to be in it for as long as possible, and that then almost redefined how I needed to innovate, adapt, become better in each and every moment to continually be in that moment. Because I didn't just want to be a one-time Springbok. I wanted to be one that played once, 10, 50, 100 times for your country, make a contribution in the most positive way possible.
Which he certainly did, and you were certainly no one-cap Springbok, 124 caps, winning a World Cup, winning so many titles, World Player of the Year. It's
And a Kes boy.
and a Kes boy. It is a remarkable record, and we could talk about this rugby career for hours, and very happily so. But I think today what fascinates me is the transition, and one of the really difficult challenges for so many sports people is career comes to an end. What do I do next? How do I adjust to life without the team environment, without the support structure sport gives you? And I think the more you have been in sport, the further you've gone, when it has come to define so much of who you are and what you do, it becomes even more difficult. But I know with you, as somebody who tends to plan ahead and looks at things, this was something you were certainly well aware of in the build-up. When did Brian Abana start to think about life after rugby and start planning transition, and that, all right, I'm going to retire and become a plumber or an electrician or see what life has to hold for me after rugby?
Or become an EXP realtor. um, no, Dan. So I'm very much of the opinion that if you want to be successful in life, balance is the last thing that you can have. And I say that because if you have three silos in your life, work, personal, family, and you give a silo balance, you're not giving it 66.666% reoccurring. So when you are a professional athlete, you understand that discipline, sacrifice, hard work, perseverance, resilience are non-negotiables. And I think the reason the transition period for professional athletes is just such a big narrative is because it is so difficult. There's no rule book that tells you what it's like to jump off the cliff, because it really is a cliff you jump off. And when I retired in 2018, brutally honest, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I was hoping to leverage off the brand I'd created. I was hoping to get certain sponsors to say, well, you can become an ambassador. But I actually didn't have any clue. And I came back to South Africa after spending 5 years in France, which, again, just gave me so much insight into how much good we have in South Africa. Because if you've left our country, and I'll always be the first to say we do have a crap load of problems, but it's only once you come back after not being here do you understand what this boiling pot of diversity, this boiling pot of amalgamation of various different cultures, the passion, the energy that we have, there's no place like it in the world. And when I came back and realized that we have such a uniqueness in South Africa, that this is the place that I want my kids to grow up. This is the place I want my kids to experience. And I didn't have a clue. And a fellow Laureus Academy member, Gary Player, has got this great quote that says, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." And I think there's a sort of piece missing from that, because there's a lot of people working hard. You don't always get to choose your own luck. And I think success comes at the inflection point where hard work and preparation meet opportunity, because it's only when opportunity gets presented where you can showcase what you are. And if I look at my life, pre-rugby, in rugby, post-rugby, a lot of that's been because I've put myself in a position to, when the opportunity's been presented to me, that I've been able to capitalize on that. And I think it firstly goes about, how you respect yourself, how you respect those around you. Do you easily burn bridges or not? And I think throughout the course of my rugby career, I made it a adamant point to not only engage, speak, and be respectful of the CEOs or the brands that I was associated with. When you go into an office, when you go into the bathroom, do you greet the janitor or the person cleaning? And I made it very apparent that in life you give what you get, and the relationships you form become critical. And even in my role now as founder and executive director at Pay Me Now, my fintech company, it was my university roommate who, from 26 years ago, came up with this concept and brought a team together. He saw something in me from that hard work, sacrifice, dedication, discipline perspective that made the opportunity successful. But all the success that I've achieved in my life hasn't been singular. And if I look at what Laureus are doing, and how we're giving back. There's never a singular effort in anything you do, and I think for that I'm very fortunate because you do work hard, but the opportunities that when they do come to your come to your front door, you better be ready to grab them with both hands, because the stat in South Africa is that if you play schoolboy level rugby in your final year of school in South Africa, your chances of becoming a Springbok rugby player in the next decade, so if you're 18, between 18 and 28, there's 0.00058%.
So you're saying there's a chance?
No, not for you. And I think that's with everything in life. When the opportunity presents itself, have you put yourself in a position where you've been disciplined, where you've worked hard, where you're then able to capitalize as that opportunity crosses your path? Because for me, it's very difficult to say who the best coach is that I played under, because I didn't choose myself. The best coach I played under is the one that selected me. And whether that be at Cares when I was in the under 14G side, or Jake White selecting me when I'd never played Super Rugby before, each and every one of those played their part in selecting me so that I could go out there and portray my abilities. And I think life is very much like that. When that opportunity crosses your path, are you ready to grab it with both hands and make it work for you? And I think for me, if I look back at the transition, it's very much been because of how I treated people and the relationships that I built, not only while I was playing rugby, but even before I became Brian Abana, the Springbok rugby player.
I love your comments about South Africa, and the room clearly did as well. I think that's been reaffirmed. My new friend Felix actually went out at lunchtime and bought a $50,000 house in Camps Bay. He's moving to Cape Town. That's, if you're not sure the exchange rate, that's 806 million rand that he spent today. So, Felix, thank you for the investment. Much appreciated. The lessons you learn, and I think you've partially answered this question, but I'll put it to you anyway. You're playing in an environment where it's this blend of the individual and the team. We see Brian, the individual, when you're bursting down the wing, you're scoring a try. There are many international rugby players who've never seen you from in front. They've only seen you from behind, chasing you, and usually unsuccessfully. But you've also got a team where if you go for that intercept and you miss it, Monty is behind you to back you up. You've got that trust amongst the teammates, and that is so critical in any team sport, but I think rugby in particular. How has that translated to venturing into the business world, where you're taking these personal individual skills that you have, but also know that you need to have that team around you who can back up the spaces where maybe you're not always so strong?
That's sort of a great segue, Dan. One of the things I've had to learn very quickly was the necessity to unlearn. And when I say that, when you go into a change room at halftime against the All Blacks and you look around the room, there's 14 other male CEOs right next to you, the best of the best in their position. I was never ever, purely because of how big he is and how scared I was of him, I was never going to tell John Smith how to throw a ball in a line out. I was certainly not going to tell Bucky's Bertha how to clean a ruck, Skalkberger how to tackle, Farid Dupree how to kick. So you're surrounded by the best of the best, and I think translating that into business, from a payment out perspective, we grew from 4 guys in a 30 square meter office with an ideology of wanting to build something successful. As the business grew, we started employing more people, and at a point last year, I was a line manager for 23 people, which I never had to do. And even as a captain in a rugby team, you've got the best of the best, and all of a sudden, 21 of those 23 people that were reporting to me are female. And I've never had to be emotionally engaged. I've never had to, and I know
Mrs. Habana will confirm this.
And when I say emotionally engaged, I mean on a rugby field, because when you're on a rugby field, I can't worry about dropping a ball, because what that means after that is that I'm going to constantly have this bad run, or I can't worry about how hard someone's going to tackle me. And physiologically, if I was worrying about how hard Richie McCaw is going to tackle me, I'm not going to be doing my job properly. So from a rugby perspective, or a professional athlete perspective, you were emotionally unengaged because physiologically that's how you got your body in the best position to function. And now all of a sudden, I need to learn how to be emotionally engaged. My wife is still telling me 17 years after being married, I'm not listening to listen, I'm listening to respond. So I'm still trying to change that. But I think the biggest learning that I've learned over the last 8 years of being in the corporate space is I needed to unlearn not to forget stuff, but to learn new stuff. And one of the biggest things I said in Japan in 2019 when we were starting the business, Dion, my CEO, phoned me. He goes, "Yes, Brian, how amazing!" Like, we're sort of going off our rockers, and he goes, "But also, you're not going to believe we've built our MVP." And I'm like, "Geez, I thought I was our MVP of the four of us." And he looks at me so confused. He goes, "What the hell are you talking about?" I'm like, "No, rugby MVP, most valuable player, right?" He goes, "No, no, Brian, we're in the tech space. MVP is minimum viable product." So I think, in this transition period, for me to learn, to grow, I've had to unlearn a lot of the singular things rugby taught me. And I think in that, understanding that in any line of business, be successful, there's always a team component. And as much as we build a tech team, if we don't have a customer support and client team, making sure that operationally we're doing things properly, if we don't have a sales and implementations team, you can be as good as you are in selling. If you can't implement it, you're not going to be able to have a successful business. And if I look in life, and even in the singular sports, like a tennis, like a golf, like swimming, even in that concept, there is a team around you. And if you can get that culture, that relationship building at a critically important point of inflection for the good, a lot of success comes from it. And I think what I've also had to learn in this new environment is there needs a sense of value to be instilled in each and every person, almost for them to find their why of what the reason is that they're doing what they're doing, or otherwise you lose them very quickly. So team is a critically important concept in any form of life, whether it be your family environment, how you and your wife handle the kids, school runs, sports, parent teachers, father sons. Team is a critically important aspect of life.
I remember having a not dissimilar conversation years ago with Brian McMillan, the famous South African cricket all-rounder. For Americans, I'll give you a moment to Google cricket. We were talking about this very same transition, and he made a very simple point, but it's one I've never forgotten, which was that being Brian McMillan allowed him to get in the door to have the meeting, but being Brian McMillan wouldn't allow him to sign the deal. That had to be because of what he was selling, why he was selling, how he was selling it. Have you found that to be similar in your journey?
Excuse my French, but I've been the shittest salesman at Pay Me Now. I've been able to get meetings, but you learn a temperament while you're playing rugby, and I think you potentially get put on a pedestal. That unfortunately, where a lot of the detriment comes into those that finish their career fall into, is that you constantly think that that pedestal that you put on is going to be there for the rest of your life. And if you don't know how to create a PowerPoint presentation, if you can't pivot table on an Excel spreadsheet, if, there's some basic concepts in the business world that you potentially don't get taught as a professional athlete. And yes, getting into the room or getting a door to get you into the room might help, but if you can't sell, or if your product isn't creating bottom line revenue or profit for that organization that you're bringing the opportunity to, chances of you selling is going to be pretty poor. And if you're not willing to unlearn what your rugby career or your professional sporting career put in place, to be able to learn new things, to learn new rhetorics, to learn how to sell better, to learn how to implement better, you're going to get caught in a position of the wilderness, because it's a cutthroat world out there. And if you're not going to be willing to outgrow that element of your life, you're going to fall behind very quickly. And I think the stat in America is that they did a survey in 2014 or 2015 around the NFL players that retire, and I think 70% of NFL players on retiring within a 5-year period are either bankrupt, in jail, have committed suicide, or divorced. Right? And that's a scary concept to sort of throw yourself into. And a lot of those that then do become successful understand that what you had as a professional athlete is no longer good enough if you want to continue living for the next 40, 50 years of your life, because the revenue stream dries up extremely quickly.
It speaks to a need for resilience that certainly isn't alone in sport. This is a room of some of the world's great realtors, but everybody in this room will have had a sale that didn't go through, or a deal that didn't work at the last minute. And you've had, both in sport and in business, those moments where you thought things were going really well, and then you've lost the game in the last minute, or something hasn't gone quite according to plan. How do the lessons from sport, from those rugby defeats, and even Brian Habana had a few, work for you now as Brian Habana the businessman?
I think the easiest thing I can say about resilience is resilience doesn't form at times of success. And if I reflect back onto my rugby career, and I was sitting with John Smith at a function yesterday, and we sort of talked about having the bubble of influence around you, because when you're at the highest stage, playing for the Springboks, living out your dream, you get swept into the false reality in which you're living. And you talk about the lows. One of the lowest points of my career was getting booed by 43,000 people individually walking off the field in Bloemfontein in 2010. And when all you've ever done is worked, sacrificed, put in the hours to represent yourself, your family, your country, and your fellow South Africans, as sports mad as we are, boo you, like there's no chasm that's going to catch you. And if you don't have a circle of influence around you that can firstly support you in the times of dire distress, if you don't have those around you to criticize you, not to break you down, but to build you up with constructive criticism, if you don't have ability of support off which to bounce ideas or ideology, you struggle really quickly. And I think in business, if you don't have a mentor who's been through it, or someone that you can talk to who understands the journey or road that you're currently traveling and has been on that journey before, and if you don't have that circle of influence of which you can bounce ideas or get perspective in life, it becomes really difficult. I said on a podcast in November last year, one of the most critically important decisions you make as an athlete is the person you decide to spend the rest of your life with, because they are there when you're at your all-time high. They are there when you're at your all-time low. They're there when the sacrifice of having your partner, your spouse, be away for 4 or 5 weeks on end, making the house a home, and there's certain elements of that bubble that become critically important to who you are as an individual. And I think resilience, and if I reflect back on rugby, we would have never, in my opinion, and it's always hindsight, it's always the best vision, but I honestly don't believe that we would have won the World Cup in 2007 if we'd had a brilliant year in 2006. 2006, we lost 6 games on the trot, one including a 49-0 drubbing in Brisbane. And, everyone was saying Jake White's the wrong person to take us to the World Cup. John Smith's too ginger, not not overweight. Victor Matfield's hair's too long. Brian Abana was a flash in the pan, and we had to have the resilience build inside of us. And I'll never forget sitting in that change room in Brisbane, and we were just so desperate to prove ourselves right, not to prove the media or the critics wrong. And I think it was in that understanding that that circle of influence meant that the resilience that we built, being able to trust each other in those times of despair, in those times of absolute distraughtness, was a lot more important than what it was beating the All Blacks at Ellis Park with Maurice Joubert scoring 3 tries 3 years prior. And I honestly believe if we hadn't gone through that period, winning that World Cup in 2007 would have never happened. And I think as a team, as individuals, we all knew that the introspection that you needed to be done, because when resilience is built, it's very easy to point fingers, and it's the introspection of your self-value, your self-worth, your self-contribution that becomes critically important in building those recipes of resilience over a period of time, because resilience also doesn't happen overnight. You don't go to bed one night and then wake up the next morning, oh, I'm resilient. It gets done over a period of time, and it's those building blocks that get put into place over that period of time that then force you to change your mindset, be better. And I think if we had, as human beings, give ourselves the ability to be better at everything we do by 1% every day, compounded over the course of our life, this world would be a phenomenal place. And sometimes we get caught in that trap of just being mundane, and resilience is something that I think people forget gets built up over time. So, that resilience building, bring into business that you need to have that self-introspection. You can't just point fingers. You need to understand where you went wrong, how you could have done things better, and then you actually need to start doing things better, because if you do the same things constantly, you're going to be getting the same results.
Resilience is not an unusual word to hear spoken of when talking about athletes, especially athletes in a high profile contact sport like rugby. Vulnerability, though, is not a word that often comes into that conversation, and yet it is such an important one. And again, everybody in this room will have times where it really has not gone well. Things have been tough, and I think we look at rugby players often as this big, tough image of macho masculinity, and you take it on the chin and just man up to things. But that's not a long-term solution. How about that side of understanding when things don't go wrong, opening up to the people around you, and sharing some of those challenges to find a solution?
I think it's absolutely brilliant to see where the world currently is, because if you'd asked me this question 22 years ago, before I made my Springbok debut, I'd have told you to shut up, Dan, because men don't cry. Because that was just the environment we grew up in. You grew up in an environment where emotion was never to be shown, and particularly in a rugby environment, you were almost of this perspective that if you do show emotion or any form of vulnerability, that is potentially seen as a weakness in your armor, a little bit of a chink that people can attack. And I think it's phenomenally brilliant to see where the openness of how people firstly need to understand that it is okay to not be okay. And I think where the world currently is with the bombardment of social media, keyboard warriors being able to break you down in an instant, if you try hold it in, I don't think people realize how much detriment and disaster that can cause. And I think in a rugby player perspective, initially it wasn't something talked about, and it's only sort of been in the last 5 to 10 years where it's become critically important that if you're not okay, everyone else is not going to be okay, because you're not going to be able to contribute as best possible because you're not at the optimal position to do that. And I think how we've seen international stars, whether it be in the rugby field, in the swimming arena, whether it be in the acting world, in the cultural world. We saw Naomi Osaka, say she literally is going to stop playing tennis because she needs to look after her mental well-being. And I think to have people who have platforms of such a big standard, having the vulnerability to do it on such a public stage makes it easier for the rest of us. And again, that circle of influence, if you don't have a circle of influence that potentially knows you, potentially is someone that you can be comfortable and vulnerable enough to let that be known to, you're going to struggle. And I think we're in a world where, if you pick up your phone every time in the morning and look at social media, whether it be X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, the world is a false reality. And if you're not able to, I want to say, gravitate towards understanding where your medium is, you're going to struggle quite intensively. So I think it's great that people do speak about vulnerability, not only from a professional sporting environment, but in the workplace. And that was one of the things I needed to learn. I needed to learn a little bit of empathy. I needed to learn that even though you're a startup founder, and you work midnight to midnight, because unfortunately, if a person's contract is from 8 to 5, you can't expect them to reply to a WhatsApp at 9 o'clock at night, where I was just in this thought, and I needed to unlearn a lot of my bad habits so that I could really understand what it was meant to be like to build up a team. But I think the fact that we can openly talk about vulnerability is something that I think is amazing, and long may it continue, because I think the more we do that, the more people can be individually themselves, and in so doing contribute positively to the world we're living in.
You touch through that, and you make some really good points on balance. Balance, probably not the topic either of us can speak on with terrific authority. Our respective wives tend to debate who spends most time away from home traveling.
That's you. You win that hands down, Dan.
But I think we're both appreciative of the fact that having that family space, having some personal time is so important. We're in a room full of entrepreneurs, people who are working flat out, working long hours. Even if it's not always as long as you'd like, how important is it for you to work in that Brian time, work in that family time, to make that work time more productive, to make it better, and to give you that crucial perspective?
Yeah, then I talked about those silos, and there's the 4 gas burner theories that people have, that you've potentially heard about, where if you've got 4 gas burners on a stove, you can't give each gas burner the required amount of gas for it to burn properly for as long as possible. And I think what I've really discovered over the course of the last 8 years, and I'll be, again, accountable, I've been absolutely horrible training wise. Like, I'm very grateful that genetically I'm still okay. But at a point, if I don't start gymming, I will stop fitting into my shirt stand and have to go up a size or two. Um, so the health part of my life has been something that I've really neglected. But I think because I've made peace and I'm comfortable with that, I really understand that it's something that I haven't, really focused on. And I can't blame anyone but myself. I can continue making excuses that, rugby was, I did it for 17 years. Every Christmas, I wasn't able to eat what I was supposed to eat. I had to be running a bleep test on the 1st of January. So I've made peace with that. But I think what I've really learned is how intentional are you with the silo that you're wanting to be at. So if you're at work, are you being distracted? If you're at your family, are you constantly at your phone? If you're watching your kids' sport, are you rather worrying about work? If you're going to the gym, are you just doing it half-heartedly, or are you actually putting in the effort to do it? I think where the world currently is that the more intentional you are with the opportunities you get within the silos of your life, therein lies, and a lot of the most successful people in the world aren't happily married because they are too focused. I mean, I wouldn't mind having been Jeff Bezos' wife that, became the richest woman in the world, from a divorce. But even in that, like, you look at the amount of effort putting success in to achieve that, and I think you also need to determine what success looks like, because, it doesn't help you leave this earth with 50 million rand under your pillow, but you haven't been happy in any other silo of your life. And I think where we are from a Laureate's perspective, you get to influence the legacy you leave behind. And it's easy to go about this world only focus on yourself, but there's just so much need in this world that if you can make a change in one person's life, you're leaving this world in a better place. And I think the platform that we get as sports people is the fact that, through organizations like Glorious, we can make a difference. And how intentional are you in making a difference? Because you can't burn all four of those gas burners at the same time. And the more you understand where you want your success to be measured, the easier it is then to put perspective into that silo.
To set your mind at rest, I don't think you're Jeff Bezos' type, but I do take the
Damn
point
it.
that is made. Before we have a quick chat about Loris, I do want to ask you one last question. We all have our different measures of success when it comes to the work that we do. What has made Brian Abana happiest about the business journey to date? And it's one that's still got a lot to unfold, but as you look at it thus far, what gives you the most joy in your reflection?
I think, firstly, making it after rugby. I think, it's it's a really strenuous time when you retire. And if I reflect now, I'm definitely no longer in the transition period. I have transitioned. I'm in the next chapter. And I think where you sometimes do get lost is you have such a sense of purpose as a athlete, as a professional sports person, because you get paid to live your dream, like, and you get paid ridiculously well to live your dream, and no one's got to motivate you in the morning to get up, whether it be at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:36, to go to gym, to train, to be good enough to be wearing the Springbok jersey for 124 test matches. I think, reflecting on the last 8 years, and, firstly with Pay Me Now, being able to be a part of a growth environment where, we were four guys in a very small office to, 75 full-time staff, and all of a sudden you're now responsible for financially impacting 75 families. But I think one of the best stories, and, rugby gave me so much joy, like in every avenue, through the highs and the lows. But, one of the best stories I had in my Pay Me Now journey was I was with my chief commercial officer up in Centurion, and we were going to a client meeting, and we quickly had a coffee at the Wimpy at the Centurion Lake Mall, and I needed to go to the bathroom, and walking out of the Wimpy to get to the public toilet, one of the companies who were our clients' staff members was in the bathroom, and I sort of just done my number one, was washing my hands, and I saw this guy. I was like, hey, like, not number two, number one. Very important. Urinal, not sitting. And as I looked at this guy, I said, "Oh, like you're from company X, you know about Pay Me Now." And at 8 o'clock in the morning, his whole facial expression changed, and the first words that came out of his mouth were "Thank you." I was like, "Jeez, thank you that I have to clean the urinal." He goes, "No, no, thank you for saving my life. Not even my family wanted to help me." And I get to tell that story with raw emotion because rugby gave me so much, and there was so much purpose in being a professional rugby player, in having that mantle of that is that is who you identify as. But I think one of the things in this other journey post rugby is the fact that I fully understand that rugby was a massively, massively important part of my life and a huge part of my life. And I think reflecting on it, I now stand 8 years on from being retired, and I'm like, well, I'm grateful that rugby was a big part of my life, but I'm even more grateful that I never made rugby my life. And if I reflect on these last 8 years, is that yes, you saw leverage of the brand you've created as a rugby player, the relationships with sponsors, partners, but rugby was only a part of my life. And I think I reflect on that journey to where I am now, and being able to be in a position of a successful fintech company that was named the fast growing company in South Africa in 2025. We're processing 1.2 million transactions on our platform. And again, it wasn't because of me. It was because I was a part of an incredible team, and it's because my purpose wasn't solely arrested in being Brian Abana, the rugby player. And for that, I'm extremely grateful, because I think if I had sort of kept that embryo of only being a rugby player, I probably wouldn't be sitting next to you on stage today, Dan.
And it would have been a very long hour for the rest of you as a result. Rugby wasn't your entire life, but it was such a big part, as is sport. We both love sport, and we have a platform we're both very honored to be part of that's given us so much and given so many others so much, and that is the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation. And just to recap from my introduction, founded 26 years ago by Johan Rupert, the South African businessman, now operating in 40 countries around the world, impacting tens of thousands of children around the world every single day. It is a platform that has got many great benefactors, and Andrew and EXP, we thank you for your continued support. You've been wonderful friends to the organization, and it does something very, very simple on a daily basis, and that, to paraphrase Madiba, is it harnesses the power of sport for good. And for somebody who's played as much sport as you have at such a high level, I can only imagine the sense of reward it gives you to be able to see on a day-to-day basis projects around the world using sport to help kids, many of them from very underprivileged spaces, to see their lives change and to give them what I firmly believe is the most important currency we can, which is hope.
Yeah, very eloquently put, Dan. So I think when the previous chairman, Mornay du Plessis, asked me to be a part of the ambassador group back in 2007, I was a bit taken aback because he's just sort of seen these global sporting phenoms. Like, it's just, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Then I started my own charity back in 2015, and I think as professional athletes, you get given a platform, and you potentially decide how you want to use that platform. I think what Laureus does, particularly if you know how to run a charity, it's extremely difficult. And I think the impact that Laureus has compounded in terms of how they actually monitor and evaluate, how they give you the ability to not have to worry about budget statements, the actual processing, the actual managing, because it is extremely tedious. But I think what started out, which was birthed in South Africa because Johan Rupert got to see the true power of sport. And again, I was in that stadium on the 24th of June 1995, and Madiba, who was probably the most ideal person to get rid of the Springbok because of what he'd had to go through in his life, 27 years in imprisonment. He could have easily got rid of the Springbok, and the visionary that he was believed in the power of sport. And as athletes, if we can't take on what the founding patron of Laureus did in terms of understanding the vision that power of sport had to be able to make an impact. Because if you look at our current world, the volatility around politics, religion, culture, where you live, the country you live in, it's so easy to get distracted or become negative. And in his opening speech, Nelson Mandela said, sport speaks to children in a language they understand. And whether you're throwing a rugby ball, kicking a soccer ball, trying to hit a tennis ball with a tennis racket, sport really is an equalizing factor no matter who you are or where you come from. And what Laureus does give us as athletes who do have platforms is the ability to play in that currency of hope. And there is almost nothing like seeing the change in a child who's given, firstly, an area of safety in a world where safety is a rare commodity, to be given a little bubble of safeguarding, a bubble of hope, but a bubble of belief in who they are in a world where everyone is trying to break them down is just invaluable. And becoming a part of that journey in 2007, you hope to make a little bit of a difference to then become an academy member in 2019, or 2020, which still to this day I don't understand why they chose me. Because it's
I don't want to stop you there because Laureus has three basic pillars. The Laureus World Sports Awards, which are effectively the Oscars of sport, being held in Madrid in April this year. There's the foundation, which we both get to work with. And then there are the athletes who really give substance and credibility to what is done. And probably the biggest smile I've seen on your face, and I include your wedding, was when you got to walk down a set of stairs and surrounding you were everybody from Luis Figo to Martina Navratilova to Michael Johnson to Marvin Hagler as you became inducted into a group of people who mostly you'd only seen on posters in your bedroom wall, and I mean that up until today. That's just an absolutely great moment.
No, it was, and again, I pinch myself because sports afforded me some of the most phenomenal experiences in my life, and being in Berlin in 2020, getting inducted into the Laureus Academy with 68 of some of the most incredible sporting men and women that the world has ever seen, really was a pinch me moment. And I think when I watched that final in 1995, that was probably the last thing that I even thought would have been possible because of what sport was going to be able to give in my life. And I think even in that moment, you sort of reflect on the power of sport, because all of a sudden you have 30, 35 academy members who come together during the awards from all different regions in the world, and their common currency or their common language is sport, and that's what brings us together. And if we see how sport not only brings people together, but in South Africa, we're just so fortunate that it unites in a way in which no culture, no politics, no religion can. And the value therein lies that you're given a platform to make a difference, not having to worry about all the operational management thereof. And Laureus, what it's done, you talk about tens of thousands of kids every day, and I think it's been something ridiculous, like 8.5 million kids since 2001, when the foundation actually started off the first awards in 2000. And the impact that we have, with partners like EXP, to continue making that difference, to continue instilling that belief of hope, and giving that place of safety, where safety is something that we're all thriving for at the minute, is an absolutely phenomenal privilege. And long may that continue. I don't get to host awards like you, Dan, so I'm very much in the back end. But I think being at that caliber of seeing athletes getting recognized for their contribution to world sports at the Oscar of Sports, at the awards, but then to see they give back, almost supersedes the awards and the laureate that they do win, because the number of children whose lives are now better off because of Laureus is just something that we are so grateful and privileged to be able to be a part of.
Like you, I've been very fortunate to visit Laureus projects. We've spent some time in Hong Kong together. I visited projects in my initial home city of Belfast in Northern Ireland, and South America and New York, and wherever we go, and South Africa reinforces that. It doesn't really matter what the sport is, and it doesn't really matter what the specific challenge is. It is this extraordinary ability of sport to get under the skin of these challenges and to give kids that belief that tomorrow can be a little better than today. And I think when we go and do these visits, every time we finish them, aside from being slightly out of breath, because they generally make us play sport with them, we come away with a big smile on the outside and an even bigger one on the inside, because in a world that is so troubled, in a world where the headlines are very rarely anything to smile about, this is a space which says, yep, there is still good out there and there is still reason to believe.
Yeah, Dan, you were part of the, was it the 2019 Hong Kong Cool Play trip that we did with Jean de Villiers, and we were on a walk for Laureus in 2019, and one of the Cool Play mentors came to tell a story to a group of very high net worth individuals that were doing a 100-kilometer trek in the Drakensberg, which, Dan, I think my knees are still stuck on one of those uphill climbs. They won 43 kilometers, was pretty brutal, 19 hours later. But Lukman Ishmael spoke about this little young colored boy that had come from Mitchell's Plain, and Cool Play, which is one of the programs that Laureus funds in South Africa, had actually taken a group of their rugby playing kids, with Jean de Villiers, who was also an ambassador, and Dan, and then Chairman Morne Duplessis, to Hong Kong to experience the Sevens, to experience this international flavor. And he tells the story of this little boy who I think was 12 years old, and when they got to the airport, this boy went up to Morne Duplessis and said, "Mr. Duplessis, this is a really special day for me." And like Morne was like, it was his 40th trip for the year. He goes, "No, my family would always come to Cape Town International and stand on the N2 at the fence and see the planes take off, and that was their highlight of the weekend." And he said, "But today, it's the first day that my family is going to be standing at the fence. I'm going to be a boy in that plane that's taking off." And like, for some of us, that might seem trivial, but for that story to be told because of what Laureus does, something that you literally can't buy. It's absolutely priceless. And I think the fortune and privilege that we have is through the programs that Laureus funds, you're constantly making a difference in people's lives. And, to be that little boy who was the first in his family to not only get on an airplane, but get on an airplane that leaves South African shores and be able to tell that story, he can now go back and continue making that difference in his own community. And sport has given us that ability to be the platform, but through Laureus, we've given that opportunity of hope in that currency of rare commodity to be exposed.
It is a project, as you can see, we're both pretty passionate about. And if you would like to know a little more, I think Natalie DeToy is in the room somewhere, one of our Paralympic gold medalists, who's also part of our Laureus family, and she'll be here through the course of tomorrow. One last piece on Laureus. We've got some wonderful people here who, through EXP, have supported, have donated, have helped to fund what we do with Laureus. I think the concept that if your community is not in a good space, your business will struggle to be in a good space speaks exactly to this, and that the money is going back in to people who are then shoring up a community, which is then going to go back in to the business that operates. So in many ways, yes, Andrew and team are supporting us, we're very grateful, but also supporting the very communities in which EXP is working in South Africa.
100%, and I think the SME and private sector economy in South Africa is without a doubt the heartbeat of our economy, and without that, South Africa potentially wouldn't be a opportunity to thrive. So firstly, Andrew, to you and your team, I know the relationship's been a couple of years, and now hopefully it's a lot more years going forward. But I think to each and every one of you that have played the part in the contribution that EXP make, not only are we extremely grateful, but we're extremely proud of how we can now use those funds and going back into the communities that Dan speaks about and try and make a difference, because we all know how much of a difference each and every community in this country is needing, for continual growth, for continual positive change. And hopefully through the work that the programs that we support do, we can become catalysts of extremely positive change in South Africa at a time where we're very much divided still, in race, religion, in politics. We're still very, very much divided. And through the currency of what Laureus do, we can build up the communities for the right reasons, and hopefully make this country a better place. So I want to sort of almost each and every one of you give yourselves a round of applause, because you've also contributed to where we're going as as an organization. So thank you each and everyone very, very much.
Before we wrap up, because as you can see, Brian needs to get to the gym, I do want to circle back to rugby, and in having not just one of the modern greats, but one of the few people to have won a Rugby World Cup, take us back to that day in Paris in 2007, what it felt like waking up that morning, what it felt like running out onto the field, and what it felt like when the final whistle went and you realized that you, Brian Abana, under 13G at Kes was now a rugby world champion.
Gee, Stan, if I could speak as eloquently as you could, I'd definitely be able to rattle off a theme book at the minute. But I think maybe to the latter part of that question, what it felt like at the end, and I think it's really difficult to describe the journey because the highs and the lows, some of the personal moments of reflection, some of the collective moments of joy that we got to experience was just, it's impossible to describe. And there's a really pragmatic photo that I think totally symbolizes what the result of hard work, sacrifice, effort is all like. And on the final whistle going on the 20th of November 2007, there's this classic photo of John Smith falling down to his knees, and the first person that he put his hand out to congratulate wasn't Victor Matfield, Skalkberger, Paris Dupré, myself. It was actually Alain Roland, the referee, because you put so much time, so much effort, so much dedication into achieving a goal, into achieving a dream, that when you reach the destination or the finish line, it's almost this sense of relief that you get to. And I think for all of us, we'd had this tumultuous 4-year journey that started off with a massive high, went to extreme lows, went to self-introspection of doubt at certain times, collective introspection of should we even be here, casual thoughts of imposter syndrome of what you're doing. But no one else outside of that collective of 30 players and 17 management will ever understand what went into that final whistle blowing and achieving that goal, because it's not something that you write down on a piece of paper one day and achieve the next day. It's a constant adding on. And I think for me, I was 23 years old, and 10 years prior, the chance of me thinking that I'd even be in a Springbok team, let alone be playing rugby, was the most far-fetched reality that I ever had. So being able to have this pure sense of relief on that final whistle going, and then the emotions of joy, elation, satisfaction coming in. There's, as much as that photo of John Smith shaking Alain Roland's hand is very cool, there's a video clip where Bismarck du Plessis still rats me out about it, but I had this nasty habit of trying to collect memorabilia when the final whistle went. So I've got quite a few balls in my garage, but on that 20th of November 2007, as Farid Dupré kicked the ball out for the final whistle to blow, my immediate reaction was not to run to where everyone was congratulating each other, but was to run towards the first French ball boy that I could find. And I thought I could speak French at that point, but I very much sounded like Joey in the episode of him trying to speak French, blah, 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 blah. To which I got a very blank 16-year-old French ball boy looking back at me, not knowing what was happening, and not giving me the ball that I was asking for. And the actual ball that Farid Dupré kicked out into the stands came bouncing down right in front of my feet. And that now sits in my garage as well, which is pretty cool. So I still get absolutely lambasted that I worried more about winning or getting the ball from the Rugby World Cup final than going to congratulate the rest of my team. But I think the sense of relief, is definitely the first emotion, and then the joy, the satisfaction, everything comes to being. But the biggest thing about winning that World Cup for us wasn't actually lifting the trophy. And we were very fortunate to be the first Springbok team to win the World Cup outside of South Africa. And back then, we were still sticking faxes up onto the team room wall. I mean, a lot of Gen Z won't know what a fax is, but 2007, Facebook was the only social media platform. I think Mixit was there, but you needed to have a phone for Mixit. So we only realized the magnitude of the win when we landed back in South Africa. And I think for all of us that had experienced 1995 and got to witness that moment, we had absolutely no clue about what we were going to receive. And if I reflect now and I look at the trophies, the medals, win bonuses financially that you got. Nothing can compare to that sight of seeing a united South Africa because of what we've done, and getting to take the trophy in and around the country, from Pretoria, Johannesburg, we went to KwaZulu-Natal, going to the Eastern Cape and seeing, little black, little African youngsters from the townships running a kilometer or two barefoot behind the bus, just to get that glimpse of hope more than anything else, was absolutely priceless. And for us, we had no clue the power of sport until we got back to South Africa. And I think individually we understood sport, but it was only until we got back did we really understand the power of sport.
The fact that 19 years later, that's still getting applause, that is still having an impact, is testament to what you guys did. And it was far more than just win a game of rugby. And what you've been able to do since then, both personally and as a legacy as a team, has been extraordinary. Brian, thank you for being here today. The promise was to show you the mind of a champion. We certainly got that, but we also got the story of somebody who's taken a remarkable career in sport and is now building it into a remarkable career in the business world. It's an absolute delight to see, and it's also fantastic to be able to share with you the work of Laureus and to do so with so many people who have supported us. So to the team from EXP, thank you all very, very much for having us. We'll look forward to seeing you a little later. I believe there are a few quiet drinks back at Andrew's hotel suite. And for those of you who are visiting South Africa, I know Brian will echo, don't make this your last trip. Do come back, spend more time with us, and spread the gospel of South Africa. We think we've got a pretty special country with some pretty special people, and we'd love to share it with you as much as possible. But for now, from Brian, from myself, and from the Laureus Sport for Good Foundation, thank you for having us, and enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you all so much for your participation today. We truly appreciate your energy and engagement. We'll see you at 6 p.m. in the Ballroom East for the welcome party. And we'll see you tomorrow morning as we kick off day 2 at 9 a.m. Thank you so much.